is Cassandra Williams from Educational Innovation 360. Today we're going to talk about what do we need to do to make sure we empower our students to be more self-directed learners. I hope you enjoy. You may ask, why does it matter? Well, we know research shows that when students take ownership of their learning, they develop critical skills beyond academic achievement, right? Being able to identify 35% of increased engagement, right? Better academic outcomes, 20% improved critical thinking skills, and 15% of enhanced self-regulation, and then last but not least is 5% of greater perseverance. So we know there are benefits to having students take responsibility of their own learning. Okay, so why student-led and voice and choice? I'm a big fan of voice and choice, but really having students be able to direct their own goals, set their own targets, of course with the help of teachers, but having critical interest in their own needs and investments in their individual outcomes, that's what we want for all students. Being able to select their own projects that relate to what they want to do in their pathways to demonstrate understanding of learning. What does flexible assessments look like? Being able to demonstrate mastery with a diverse way to track goals and experience and expertise. And then being able to reflect on opportunities. What went well? How do we self-regulate? Right? How do we recognize our growth and identify our own areas for improvement? So we know there's this thing, of course, called goal setting, SMART goals, self-directed learning. And thinking of that, we always think about how do we set specific goals, right? What does it look like to be clear and measurable, like our SMART goals? How can our students on their own really develop an action plan for what they want to achieve? What does it look like to develop concrete steps within their goal and thinking of their own time frame to when they will achieve it? What does it look like to track progress? What are their systems to monitor when they have taken the next step and to when to seek out help? And then, of course, working to celebrate. Always celebrate many goals, many accomplishments to make sure that they can get to the next step in their own learning journey. Now, you and I know that it's tied to social emotional learning, meaningful tasks that really are true to the heart of our students. Having students become more self-aware, understand their own emotions and strengths, social emotional awareness, how are they developing empathy, what does it look like to manage oneself to regulate the emotions, and then how are they developing relationships with partnerships and just understanding how do I connect with peers, adults. Being able to make responsible decisions based on projects and practice. And then there's the thinking about their own thinking and their reflection on this journey. Being able to track and articulate what was their learning process and practice. And then, thinking about what does that look like with tracking their progress and the storytelling of the narrative based on their findings. How are they able to monitor the understanding of the skill that they have taken on and check for understanding? What does it mean to evaluate what worked, what did not work, and how do I create new? And even thinking about how do we adjust our approach, right? What do I have to do to kind of modify these techniques that I've learned to benefit what I am going for and my goals? Now, let me be honest. It's a fine line to really balance what this looks like. And so there are pieces of teacher support and there are much needed student directives. So really thinking about what are the teacher elements to implement something like this, you have to have clear learning targets. If you don't understand what is the end in mind, then this will be a struggle for you. There has to be consistent checks, classroom procedures, and skills based on this idea of project management, teams, and support. Of course, we know explicit instruction and foundational skills for our students to be able to have to even engage in something like this. Scaffolding techniques needed along the way, so teachers are becoming the role of facilitators and supporters in allowing students to nurture their upward mobility, and even thinking about what does it mean to provide regular feedback on projects to make sure your students are moving even in the right direction. And so here are the student elements, right? Thinking of what are the choices that they have in the projects and the formats that they can produce. How does flexible seating work in your classroom for students to be able to learn in multi-dimensional environments, right? With adults, learn with students and peers, learn outside of the classroom. What does self-selected practice activities look like, and how can either teachers provide those either asynchronously or provide those through mentorship or online digital format? And then how do you monitor goals? How do students monitor their own progress and check off the list like we did this? Now here is the next step towards our goals. Now we know if you want to try something like this, there is practical strategies around this. So thinking of what are your relationships outside the classroom so your students can have more connection and collaboration with that. And students, this is tricky, but students have to be able to take risk and kind of put themselves out there to do these type of strategies. inquiry-based learning. How do we get students interested, asking questions, continuously thinking? I always like to say the scientific method. How our students are inquisitive about the topic at hand. How are we encouraging exploration through our classroom and curriculum, and helping guide students through that discovery. Also, as well as scaffolding, being able to identify where students need help or where to back off to let students struggle a bit. Being able to match the goal setting with the structure and that gradual release to make sure students are meeting their expectations. And then thinking about how does the classroom even look? What does the daily routine need to look like? And so there's often this, like I said, thinking out loud, taking activities, or rather than treating them as assignments, thinking about what are the different initiatives that you need to learn about or need to know to make sure that you can accomplish the goal that you set at hand. Let me just say, if you are first starting this out, there are some common challenges, and there is messiness when you start something like this. So just beware and be willing to kind of embrace the messiness, and then support your students when growing in this concept. So really thinking about, there are students that are like, what? You want me to do what? Research on my own, right? And some students may resist kind of taking ownership or responsibility. And so a lot of students prefer the comfort of the teacher-directed learner, which many of them have been trained to do for years and years on end. So it takes a little work for you to kind of try this or try something new to where this will continue to work, right? So thinking about how you provide reassurance to your students and celebrating small wins to build confidence of the students. And then there's the stakeholder concerns, which you're going to find a lot of pushback from either leadership. Unless your principal is on board, you might get a little pushback from leadership or pushback from families with, students kind of feeling like, I don't know how to do this, right? And so thinking about being able to articulate, this is going to look a little different, and this is going to be your students' own educational experience for growth. And being able to, again, articulate to families, this is the end, this is where we're headed. Some people do this project, some people do this project, and it's up to you, your student, to find the path that they want to explore. And then there's the time. This takes some time, because you are not only being a facilitator, but you're scaffolding, you're grading, you're meeting with individuals on their projects. And so it does take a little more time. This initiative takes a lot of planning and a lot of connections and collaborations. You have to think of who are the people that your students are going to be connected to, what are the mentors in this component, and then thinking about how does this curriculum kind of help or support some of the initiatives that you want to have. Okay, it is time. It's time for you to be on this journey to try. You need to try with a little student ownership, thinking about how do you transform your classroom to at least have it in a collaborative method to where students can actually integrate ownership in their daily practices. So you might start off with something very small, and then you can expand on that. Also thinking about, this is an experiment, and you would try different things to see what kind of sticks, what works, what didn't work, how you had to maybe prepare the rubric, maybe you had to prepare the groups, or, so you have to kind of pick and choose and to identify what went well. And then after the end, I would definitely say you debrief not only with yourself and write down some of the things that worked and didn't work well, but with your students, say what would have been better, what would have made this better, how could we have made this better? And then of course, I encourage you to plan your approach, to implement this on a small level before you all right, we're going to do the whole unit, right? Think of one activity, and then we can expand on that. I hope these tips help. Try it. I encourage you to try it. Talk to you later for more. Bye.